The only thing more dangerous than an idea is a belief. And by dangerous, I don't mean thought-provoking. I mean might get people killed. Hello, I'm M.E. from M.E. and History. This quote comes from Sarah Vowell's 2008 book, The Wordy Shipmates. Okay, so you don't recognize Sarah Vowell by name. But if you're interested in animated films, you're probably familiar with her voice. Not sure who her character is? Take some time to think after I say this line. Normal? What do you know about normal? What does anyone in this family know about normal? We act normal, Mom. I want to be normal. If teenage superheroine Violet Parr from the 2004 Disney Pixar film The Incredibles and its 2018 sequel Incredibles 2 went from invisible to visible in your brain, you're right on the money. But apart from being involved in the world of a computer-animated family of supers, Sarah Vowell is also known as an author of books on American history. Among these books are The Partly Cloudy Patriot, Assassination Vacation, and, of course, The Wordy Shipmates. It is from the latter of these books that the event of this video is briefly mentioned. That event, which occurred from January or February of 1692 to May of 1693, was the Salem witch trials. When we hear the words Salem witch trials, we might think about Arthur Miller's 1953 play, The Crucible, or about groupthink, or about religious fanaticism, or about whether or not you're normal enough. Whether you've got a physical or mental disorder, obscure interests, or heck, even superpowers, being an outsider is tough. It's even tougher if people's beliefs say that outsiders should be punished or outright murdered. But what caused this dark moment in American history? This question has been debated over for years. However, I've come to realize that many factors created the brew that caused the trials, factors that we need to gather. And we can't do that by going straight to the main event. Instead, I will be covering this horrific period in a series of videos. So without further ado, let's climb onto our metaphorical broomsticks and begin our journey. We'll begin by making a stop in 16th to 17th century England. During this period, the Church of England, aka the Anglican Church, was the religious order of the day. The Anglican Church was a product of the Reformation and was quite unique in that it was a combination of both Catholic elements and Protestant reforms. The reason for this blending of customs and rituals was to keep the peace between the Catholics and the Protestants living in England. Progressive though this mixture was, however, there was one sect in England that wasn't satisfied. This sect, later to be known as the Puritans, wanted to cleanse and purify the Anglican Church from the remnants of popery that they were still sniffing in the air. They also memorized the Bible cover to cover, strove to live by its example, and wanted for England to change its lifestyle so that it could line up with their moral beliefs. Unfortunately for the Puritans, all of those concepts made them walking targets among the Anglicans. Indeed, William Shakespeare made fun of the Puritans via the character of Malvolio in his 1601 or 1602 play, Twelfth Night. And, despite a few small religious victories, the monarchy, particularly when James I and Charles I sat on the English throne, persecuted the Puritans for not being normal enough. 4 choices lay before the Puritans. 1. Obey the laws and keep their heads down. 2. Maintain their views in secret and risk discovery by the monarch's forces. 3. Fight back and start a revolution. Or 4. Leave England and worship elsewhere. Given their situation, a lot of Puritans chose option 4 and journeyed to the New World, with Massachusetts being a hot spot. There they built what Governor John Winthrop called a city on a hill, a kind of English promised land where Puritanism could be practiced openly. The goals of this heaven on earth community? To be a shining example of true Protestantism, to bring religious reform to the English Empire, and to make everyone upright and normal. From the 1620s to 1640s, a period known as the Puritan Diaspora, things in Massachusetts were going quite well. Settlements popped up and expanded. A strong emphasis on education led to high literacy rates and some of America's earliest schools, like Harvard University. The economy was booming, spurred on by trade with both Europe and the New World. A 1629 charter established the Massachusetts Bay Company and also served as a frame of government. The metaphorical cherry on top came in 1649 when Oliver Cromwell sent Charles I to the chopping block. With the English Commonwealth in charge, it seemed that Massachusetts was fulfilling its ultimate goal of making everyone normal. But by the mid to late 17th century, however, the city on a hill was in crisis. Although the Puritans had fled England to get out of the crosshairs of narrow-minded Anglicans, they were themselves just as intolerant of those who weren't normal enough. When dissenters like Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams challenged the status quo, they were banished, often to Rhode Island or Connecticut, or executed. This intolerance didn't just extend to Puritans who challenged what was normal. It extended to other people within Massachusetts, be they Native American tribes with non-Christian beliefs or French settlers with papist ones. As the Puritans expanded further and further into New England, fights such as King Philip's War and King William's War broke out between the Puritans and the Native Americans, some of whom were allied with French settlers. Thousands were killed, wounded, captured, or forced to flee their homes. An influx of refugees swarmed into settlements not affected by the fighting, putting a strain on resources. Things only got worse when the English monarchy was restored in 1660. Knowing a king was back on the throne brought unease to the Puritans because it was a sign that the city on a hill hadn't achieved its goals. When Charles II revoked the 1629 charter from Massachusetts Bay in 1684, the Puritans' fears intensified because it left them in a state of political limbo. Even though a new charter was created later on, it was a charter that was tolerant of all Protestant sects, including Anglicans, and combined all of the New England colonies into one giant landmass under the Crown's control. now back under the thumb of a corrupt Anglican monarchy and surrounded by other religious sects and ideas that weren't normal, the Puritans saw their troubling situation as a sign that God had forsaken them. Now, I know what you're thinking. M.E., stuff like this could bring hysteria anywhere in Massachusetts or anywhere in the world, for that matter. Why did it happen in Salem? My viewers, you make a very strong point. Instability and intolerance can indeed bring problems anywhere. But to understand what made Salem so special, we have to zoom in for a closer look and pick up some more factors along the way. For starters, we should be aware that there were not one, but two Salems present at the time: Salem Town and Salem Village. Salem Town was a wealthy port city inhabited by prosperous merchants. Salem Village, on the other hand, was populated by poor farmers who made a living off the land. Over the course of several years, tensions between the haves and have-nots grew. Salem Village was under Salem Town's jurisdiction and thus had no say in determining crop prices, collecting taxes, or even having its own meeting house and minister. Because church attendance was mandatory, all residents of Salem Village had to make the arduous 3-hour trek to Salem Town to listen to sermons, rain or shine. Not surprisingly, resentment festered. But there wasn't just a division between the two Salems. There was a division within Salem Village itself, caused by a growing social rivalry between two prominent families: the Porters and the Putnams. The Porters were a rather unique bunch who lived near Ipswich Road, not far from Salem Town. Though they were religious without a doubt, the Porters were also worldly and open-minded, not just religiously, but politically, economically, and socially. And while the Porters certainly benefited from agricultural operations like the rest of Salem Village, they were also successful entrepreneurs with connections not only in Salem Town, but in the rest of New England and even the Caribbean, connections that made their wealth flourish still further. The Putnams, on the other hand, were the polar opposite of the Porters. They followed the conservative, normal lifestyle of their early Puritan ancestors, resisted change, hated merchants with a passion, and supported the interests of the bulk of Salem Village's population. Because the Putnams didn't have the kinds of connections that their rivals had, their wealth was quite stagnant and at times declined. Even though they were aware of the fact that their power and influence was slipping through their fingers like water, the Putnams would stop at nothing to stand their ground and make their case to return to the normal way of life, one way or another. In 1674, the already tense rivalry between these two families worsened when Salem Town finally permitted Salem Village to have its own meeting house and minister. After 3 ministers came and went due to the squabbling, pettiness, and backbiting that was Salem Village's middle name, the Putnams got a victory that they thought would make Salem Village return to normal. That victory, which occurred in 1689, came in the form of a failed merchant turned minister from Barbados by the name of Samuel Parris. At first blush, Samuel Parris seemed like a good choice because he brought stability to Salem Village by filling in the post of minister. But that stability was only temporary. Because Paris had failed as a merchant, ministry was his second career choice. His resentment towards successful merchants began to show in his sermons. Over time, Paris's messages turned the Porter versus Putnam factionalism into a kind of never-ending cosmic struggle between God and Satan, giving his sermons a warlike vibe to them. To his supporters, especially the religiously conservative Putnams and their allies, Paris's message was crystal clear. Salem town's influences were causing Salem village to stray from the path. The only way out, however drastic, was to cut ties with Salem town and everything associated with it so that Salem village could be normal again. But the Porters weren't going to go down that easy. In an effort to get this close-minded minister kicked to the curb, the Porters and their allies stopped paying Paris's salary. Unfortunately, their actions had the opposite effect. Paris, more resentful than ever before, remained in Salem village and continued dishing out his fire and brimstone sermons, further heightening the tensions and setting the stage for the hysteria to come. It is here that I must now pause on our journey. Why? Because we have gathered all but one needed factor for our explosive concoction. So, put all of these factors into your metaphorical cauldron, mix them together, and let them stew, and wait for the next video of the series. It is then that I will break out the last and most important factor: the beliefs of or about witchcraft. These beliefs weren't just thought-provoking. They caused so many unnecessary and pointless losses. And for what? For the sake of society becoming normal again, that's what. And in this case, not being normal enough was a deadly thing. I'm ME from ME and History and YouTube.